So I'd like to get right into it. We got a great panel today, I like to think. I'm really excited to be actually presenting for my first time at AdTech. I'm currently the Chief Marketing Officer of Internet Marketing Ninjas. I actually just started there in February. It's a company that used to be known as We Build Pages. Our CEO is Jim Boykin. Anyone that knows SEO may have heard of him before. And I'm also the chairman of SEMPO, which is Search Engine Marketing Professionals Organization. We're a global group. Kevin right here is a former chairman himself. And you can find me on Twitter at Boggles. What I'm going to talk today is, we've got this actually, I think, hopefully set up pretty well for you. I'm going to go very high level, big picture stuff. Then Jim's going to come in with some very survey-oriented type of data and insights. And then Jeff is going to focus in on mobile and granular kind of tactics associated with that and what's working today. And we're going to finish off with Kevin and Derek in a joint presentation, really getting into some case studies and some even more granular stuff. So I hope that you guys will enjoy the presentation, and I'll get right into my portion. So one of the things that I like to use is military analogies. My last one was if you use military type of triage, that means that if there's a massive amount of casualties, typically the military will treat the least wounded first so they can get them back out on the battlefield. Same thing you should think about with websites or numbers of properties that you have. You want to go get those least wounded back out to the battlefield. So for AdTech, I've decided to bring in the artillery analogy. I actually was artillery section chief for the United States Marine Corps. I was very proud of that. One of the things about artillery that you may or may not know is that typically it's a battery of 6 guns. So there are 6 guns that get emplaced over an area of maybe a quarter mile or so, a couple acres. And their mission is to either defend ground troops that are up ahead or to attack something or whatever. So when artillery attacks, it's not just all the cannons shooting at once. What happens is you start off with one of the cannons essentially targeting in and figuring out exactly where that target needs to be, or exactly where you need to shoot in order to be able to effectively hit that target. We're going to talk about the forward observers that help that in just a moment, but think of your marketing tactics, especially these days, as having different artillery pieces, right? You have your mobile, your social, your paid media, your own media, your earned media, et cetera. And each of these could be considered as a different artillery piece. Now, in order to hone in on your target, you may want to use one and effectively make sure that you've established what the target is, and then fire for effect, which is what artillery does when all the cannons fire at once and blow that dirt to kingdom come that's 20 miles away or something. So keep in mind that the tactics that are used by an artillery unit in order to hone in on a target can be very effective for us as marketers as well these days. Instead of firing all of your guns at once and hoping to hit here and there, which you may have budget to do, you may want to more surgically strike and get onto your target with one of your marketing mediums. This goes against sort of the idea of always pushing integration and trying with all the marketing tactics at the same time. But trust me, if you try this and you hone in on your targets, you'll find that this is effective. The other thing is that, there's 6 guns, so you have gun 1 through 6. You may use gun 1 for some target acquisition. You may use gun 3 for other types of targets acquisition. So don't always think that you need to lead with paid search, for example. That's one of the classics in our industry, and it is very valuable to use paid search to do research of how effective your content is, how conversion-oriented your website may be, things like that. And it's a great sort of first piece to get onto your target. But in some cases, you may want to consider mobile or social or something like that. So marketers do need good forward observers, though. The big point about artillery is that you have people that are hiding in the bushes way up 20 miles ahead that are telling you, hey, am I hitting this? So those forward observers for us should be analytics, right? Ideally, your analytics are set up properly to tell you, hey, you need to move over 200 yards and up 500 yards in order to more effectively hit your target. So keep that in mind as well. If you're not leveraging your analytics these days, especially across your different types of artillery or different types of marketing mechanisms, you're going to have problems firing for effect and really covering your target appropriately across the different kinds of media that you're using. So one of the things we're going to talk, or that I'm talking about really, is what we are, where we're at today in the search engine landscape. I'm mostly going to focus on Google. There's a lot of things with Bing that are great and that are similar, but I only have a few minutes. So who can tell me, first of all, what that chemical compound there is in the middle? Anyone? Oh, I got a $5 Starbucks gift card, and that's quite a hint. Okay, it's caffeine. So who knows what Google's caffeine infrastructure update was a few years ago? Hands? Okay, I better back this up a little bit then. So Google is well known for a lot of their algorithm updates, as well as their quality score updates, and different ways that they help to ensure the quality of the advertising that occurs within their properties and across their network on the paid side. But they also have a lot of updates to help determine algorithmically which pages of content or which elements of content, whether they be video or news or text or whatever, are able to appear within the search engines. A few years ago, Google came out with this update called Caffeine, which a lot of people confuse as being an algorithm update, but it was in fact a technology update. And what Caffeine did is it completely changed the way that Google is today. It enabled them to be far more, it enabled them to be far pickier in terms of the types of content, and also far more real-time in terms of what they're delivering to searchers and based on their particular intent at that time. Some of the things that it's helped to drive are some of the algorithm updates, like some of you may have heard of the so-called zoo updates, including panda and penguin. You guys heard of that? Anyone been negatively affected by those? Okay, so this technology, this caffeine updated, really enabled them to, in a much more real-time manner, identify and rate content and determine whether or not it was going to be valuable to the user, which is their most important thing, right? Focused on the user, and all else will follow is what Google leads off in their 10 things they know to be true. What it's also done is it allowed them to expand a lot on their offerings. If you see on the top, that's a little snippet for, right here in San Francisco, if you do a search for Toyota Prius or Toyota Camry or something, you're going to get this test unit that appears below the paid search results and above the organic, which allows you to go look at google.com cars. This is just in a testing area, but this is a really big thing, especially if you're a car manufacturer or a car dealer, because it's something that's being changed thanks to Google's increased technology. Another thing is Google+. If you look at the snippet on the left there, this is from the right nav of a search for Transamerica Corporation. One of the biggest misses, I think, in 2012 is for big brands using Google+, simply because of that. If someone is typing in your name, you have the ability now to talk to them almost in a real-time manner. In this case, this Transamerica was the recent post there is from a few days ago, but there's a lot of brands out there now that if you go type in their name into Google, they have the ability to speak directly in real time to the people that are looking for them through means of the posts that they're putting at Google+. We got Google Now, and we're going to kind of cover off on that a little bit in some of the other presentations, but all this combines to form a constant of change, right? And so that's what you have to keep in mind these days is with the technology where Google's at and the types of results that they can return and the increased complexity of their algorithm, especially around intent, that's going to really change the way that you should be marketing. This is a very simple example. This is a search for Nike shoes. As you can see, I've cut off the right side there because there was nothing on the right side, just so you know. So you've got the one ad on the top that's actually coming from Nike, and then you have another store Nike, Nike this, Nike that. So Google has pretty much determined that you're wanting Nike, and it's giving you this type of result. Now, if you change that search by one word, you've completely changed the experience that the searcher is going to get. And this is, if there's one thing you're going to take from my section of the presentation, this is it, right? You have to fully understand the nuances between the search results and the experience that people are getting based on these slight little changes in the keywords. No longer can you just focus on just Nike shoes, and maybe the slight nuances between shoes and Nike shoes and buy Nike shoes, but now you have a completely different experience that's happening. If I do Nike shoes reviews, if I do running shoes reviews, it's going to show me another completely different experience. So in today's space and in understanding and maximizing your performance in today's search space, you actually have to be a lot more cognizant of this variety of results that's coming out in the search engines. And if you're not keeping track of it, chances are that you're missing out on a lot of things. And you're also probably going to miss out on the ability to really determine what Google thinks the intent of some of your pages are. So take the time to understand where you're at. Do you need to do manual monitoring? Just understanding what comes up when you type in Nike in the Google autocomplete, which used to be known as Google Suggest, right? This is something where it's very important to understand these, because as you type through, you will also see Google Instant updating the search result page, thanks again to Caffeine, to sort of preemptively decide what you're searching for. So lastly, Google and Bing do like social, no pun intended. You can do very well with social in the search landscape nowadays, but again, you have to control each of your entities. In the example of Macy's, they have a number, their Facebook, their Twitter, and the Google Plus account there. But it provides now even more opportunity to interact directly with searchers through your social entities. So you have to understand that, and if I had more time to go into the whole folksonomy and the reason that this is important from a crowdsourcing perspective, I would. One last thing I'll leave you with, just today being announced, Facebook announced that you're able to put your emotion in what you're posting. So I'm feeling mad, I'm feeling sad, and so forth. I just read this a few minutes ago from TechCrunch. That is huge, right? How are the search engines going to leverage that to potentially influence some of the ways that they're returning search results? So thank you. I'm going to kick it on over to Jim now, and you can once again find me at Boggles if you'd like on Twitter. So Jim is going to focus in on some great survey data from some, oops, that's the wrong one. Sorry about that, folks. Let me close that one out. Et voila.
Great. Thanks a lot, Chris, and thanks a lot, everybody. As Chris mentioned, one of the things that I wanted to do is talk a little bit about what we're seeing across all these different marketers. But before I do that, one of the really interesting stats that I saw recently is that 90% of all global data has been produced in the last 2 years. That's incredible. There's more data created in the last 2 years than all the data combined in the previous decades and decades. And so why is that? A lot of that is driven by all the change that's happening, right? People are sharing, people are tweeting things, people are linking to things, people are searching for things. All the different dynamics that you're seeing the search engines evolve to, right, is being driven by this end change in terms of the end consumer behavior changes and just this massive creation of new data that is happening. And so that's a massive change that's happening. And so what we do is at Bright Edge is we work with a lot of the major brands out there in the organic search. And so what we did was we did a survey of about 4,500 brands, looking at what are the things that they're planning to do with regards to search, and what are the major changes that they're seeing that they need to plan for in the coming year. And the first thing that you'll notice is that now organic search is really on the CMO's radar. That's a pretty massive shift. Organic search used to be, 5-6 years ago when we started, it used to be very much something that people would, outsource, or people would kind of have somebody in the back room doing. Now it's really very much at the front and center at the CMO's agenda. And what that means is it's really important to actually start quantifying and understanding the value of organic search in terms of the revenue impact and so forth. So that's one of the first things that we're seeing is a massive change that's happening within marketing organization. And the second thing, as I mentioned, is not only are we seeing that massive change with the brands, the consequence of that is that brands really are looking at how do you drive organic search beyond the bits and bytes, beyond the links, beyond the page optimizations and so forth, to something that's linked to ROI. And in addition, to really start forecasting from the channel. That's something that's incredibly powerful and a new sort of dimension that we're seeing is marketers really wrapping their arms around how do you forecast the value of organic search and using that to drive the planning and the roadmap behind what you do in this channel, year over year, quarter over quarter, and so forth. A major change that we're seeing, right, with that marketers are seeing is that mobile is a massive dimension that's now impacting search. Search results are different with when you search for things mobilely across, again, very impacted by those different types of keywords and the intent behind those keywords. So we're very much seeing impact of mobile within the organic results, and consequently, you really have to manage your SEO programs with that in mind. One interesting stat that we've seen probably across our customer base, across the different keywords that they manage, about 20% to 25% of those keywords are now impacted by mobile and local. And in fact, mobile rankings and mobile, sort of how you're performing in mobile search is impacted a lot by local as well. There's a huge intersection there. You can do this right now. If you go on your mobile phone and search for something like ATM or search for pharmacy, you're going to see that there's this big shift versus when you search on your desktop, where local is much more impactful when you're searching on those keywords on your mobile device. You're going to see mobile packs of what are the local ATMs based on the location that we're in. You're going to see that you can click to call, right, directly from those local packs. That's a fundamental shift in that search real estate that we as marketers have to deal with. So that's a major trend that we're seeing, is that massive impact of mobile and local. Google Now, right, a further shift in that model where it's search almost without searching, where you've got mobile, you've got voice, you've got all those different dimensions bundled in. So that's really this massive evolution that we're seeing as local and mobile come together to really reshape search. A big part of what you want to do as you start looking at mobile and local specifically is subset the different sets of keywords that you're managing, the content that you're managing, so you can pinpoint the areas where local has impact, where mobile has impact. So then you can take action on that, right? Because once you subset the portion of the different keywords and the different pages that you have that are impacted by local and mobile, you can then target the optimization for those pages. And again, similar to what Chris was talking about, massive change in 2013 with all the different updates, including Panda, Penguin, and also the Venice update. The Venice update happened last year. It's an update that was talked about a little less, but it's made local packs much more prevalent in those results, right? So you're going to see a lot more local packs show up. You're going to see that take up a lot of the real estate. You'll see here, right, in this example here, it's almost taking up a third of the middle real estate in that page. Those are local packs, right? So it's no longer about the 10 blue links, and what that means is we really have to focus on driving the channel that way. Integration across all channels, right? Really driving integration across search, across all these different channels. We're seeing huge impact there. You're going to see, I think, a lot more convergence of how do you leverage data from one channel to another. And we'll talk a little bit about some of that as well. 2/3 of brands with that major reshifting of the universal search and how you're actually placing the search results really is driving brands to start look at how do you measure your rank performance given all those different types of search results where it's no longer just the 10 blue links. And social continues to be a major priority, right? There's huge dimension. Probably one of the biggest changes that's happened to search in the last decade or so is the social graph is really starting to cannibalize the link graph, right? It's really starting to reshift or at least sort of reshape the link graph, right? So social, this is why Google Plus is so important for Google. It's also why, more and more social impact is having a bigger and bigger impact on search results and search rankings. We've started to see clear impact that you can drive by bringing together those two programs. So how many people have a social program today in their companies? Raise your hand. Right, a huge number. How many of you have search programs? Raise your hand. Now leave your hand up if you actually have the search and social team work together to drive better impact. Right, so lots of opportunity there. Those of you that aren't doing that, right, huge opportunity to bring those programs together because these two channels are having huge interactions. Right, so you can really bring together search and social. We saw, for example, a case study where there was 47% increase in search ranking performance by bringing together search and social to drive better social engagement in those paid targeted pages to drive better search performance. Content marketing, right? Chris talked a little bit about these big updates with Panda and Penguin and so forth, right? A lot of that is to drive focus into content. And that's making a major shift in terms of the focus for marketers where content really is becoming a core part of how you have to think about optimization and is going to be core for, as you think about sort of the future strategy of how you want to do optimization, it's becoming a very important part of where you want to really focus. Social content is really key. Not only creating that content, but where are you going to drive that content and where are you going to drive engagement for that content. Right? You see some of the focus here in terms of where brands are looking to really drive engagement for their content. Right? And these are kind of some of the key channels that clearly there's a lot of focus for search marketers on where they want to drive social engagement for their content. So this is kind of the top list here in terms of the tips. One, you really want to start not only quantifying the ROI of the search channel, but really start looking at forecasting. Huge opportunity there, and that really brings and elevates the channel to a level of conversation that makes sense to the C-suite. Mobile and tablet search are clearly the next frontier. We're seeing huge volume increase there in terms of revenue, somewhere upwards of 30% in some verticals. Local search both for local and mobile are tied really closely together. You're going to see that if you try to just search for some of those keywords I mentioned. Blended search, right? It's not the 10 blue links anymore. You have to understand these local packs, images, videos, all of these are reshaping that real estate that you have on the valuable SERP page. Social continues to be a major factor that drives better search performance, so you really want to bring those channels together. Content is really critical, right? More and more with these updates, so the focus on content and ultimately optimizing and not only the content, but also driving social engagement to that content so you can drive lift from the channel. Great. So that's pretty much what I had. You want to turn it over? Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
So some survey data. Now we're going to get into a little bit of different genre of content here, starting with Jeff, who brings from his Performix experience some content, I think, primarily. I'm sorry? Yep, some content primarily related around mobile, but don't kill me if I'm wrong.
No, that's right.
Oops. Is this your start?
That's, yeah, that's good enough. Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Perfect.
Voila.
Hey, my name's Jeff. I'm from Performix. We're a digital agency. It's part of Zenith Optimedia and the Publicis Group. I'm going to talk to you guys about mobile and tablet stuff, specifically Google Enhanced Campaigns, and I think classic our industry timing. I sent this to AdTech yesterday, and today Google announced some changes. So there'll be a couple things in here I'll try to clarify based on this morning's announcement. But I'm going to run through a few things. First of all, the way we bid on keywords and paid search has changed, probably forever, and you need to know that and be aware of it and what it's going to do to your campaigns. There's going to be an impact to anything you do on a smartphone, and moving forward, tablets and desktops are going to be treated the same, and you're going to have to adapt a little bit to there. So I'm going to walk through two basic things here. First of all, I'm going to tell you why I think it's awesome and kind of go against the grain here where a lot of people think this isn't that good of a thing. And then I'm going to do some really tactical stuff to show you guys how we're taking our enterprise level advertisers through this and giving you guys some of the kind of quantitative and qualitative things we're using to help them be successful. So first, why do I think it's awesome? Well, so moving forward, anything that is going to be targeted to the desktop is automatically going to be targeted to tablets. And you're automatically going to be targeting smartphones as well. However, there's some nuances with how you can change the bids, and you can opt out of it if you really want to, but it's probably not a good idea. Tablets, again, a part of desktop. All of your keywords are going to serve automatically across all of them. It's not going to be possible to create campaigns that only target smartphones, which is probably not cool, but again, I'll explain why I think it's great. And lastly, and this is really the quantitative part that you have to stay on top of is that your quality score is going to do this weird, like, weighted average across different experiences for each keyword, and that's going to destroy you guys if you had a bad experience. So,
can you just quickly back up for 1 second to make sure they know you're talking about the Google paid search?
Oh yeah, so Google enhanced campaigns. That's what this is specific to. Head nods? People are familiar? Great. So, shared quality score, quantitative, why it's great. So it's going to make you guys, make all of us as advertisers, ensure that there's a better consumer experience. And Chris, I'm going to knock your targeting analogy for a minute right here. So we don't really believe in targeting or in going after consumers anymore at Performix. And we'd like more people to adopt this mentality as well. We think people make thousands of decisions a day. It's the same decision over and over again, and it's deciding whether or not to participate with a brand. So we want to, as advertisers, empower individuals to participate with all of the brands that we represent. And hopefully they have a great experience with them and want to work with them more. And so this change is going to force people to do a couple things, create better experiences on tablets and smartphones, and it's going to have to drive some change management inside of your organizations, because you're going to have to start managing how you measure mobile experiences and tablet campaigns and mobile campaigns differently. So bidding isn't just on the keyword anymore. Moving forward, you're going to be bidding on keywords, and then at the now ad group level, you're going to be bidding on smartphones, and you can do this with a plus or a minus as a percentage. Previous to today, it was campaign level, so that's one of the changes from the presentation. And then you're also going to be, at the campaign level, be able to manipulate those bids based on location, speaking a little bit to what Jim and Chris talked about earlier, as well as time of day or traditional day parting. Through this transition, you have to ask yourself two things, and this is the qualitative and quantitative piece. Quantitatively, what's going to happen to your quality scores? Qualitatively, and I think this is kind of the rule of thumb and finger test, and that's if you still have to pinch and scroll on your smartphone campaigns, opting into smartphones is probably going to be a bad idea once you change into the Google Enhanced campaigns. So this is basically all of our calculation for how we figure out if you should opt into enhanced campaigns for your smartphones. You need to estimate what's going to happen to your quality score. You need to create some sort of weighted equation for how you're going to, based on your goals, for what's going to happen after they're combined and averaged. You need to kind of look at that yourselves and what you're trying to drive, what you're trying to do in order to achieve that. I couldn't put one up here that worked for everyone. You're going to have to kind of come up with your own. If it's drastically affected, your quality score drops by more than 50% probably, you're not going to want to jump in. If it's less than 50% of a decrease, go for it. So again, I kind of just covered this, but on the qualitative side of things, if there are no serious usability concerns going into the smartphone campaigns as well, you should be good. If you have any serious usability concerns, bad idea. Don't do it. How do you look at the smartphone experience? Well, these are some of the things we've been exploring using, playing with to illustrate to our advertisers that they have bad experiences on their phones. Each one of these is a great way to go out and measure if it's good or bad. You can always just look on your iPhone, but you don't know if it's going to look the same on an Android device unless you have a whole bunch of cell phones. And then as far as the desktop and tablet piece goes, now that desktops and tablets are going to be treated as the same by Google, you're going to need to be on some sort of responsive design platform. We see that more and more participants are expecting that they're going to be able to have all of the features on their tablet, and probably more than they would on their desktop. And the only way to do that is to really have something that's slick, works well on both. Otherwise, you're going to create a ton of work for your IT teams. Lastly, for years, we've known that Google does not see experiences in the same way a human sees them. So take the opportunity to really evaluate the landing pages you're using for tablet campaigns and desktop campaigns moving forward. And just as a tip, a lot of the landing pages that do well for SEO on tablets would be the right landing pages to start using for desktops. So mobile search as a whole is completely changed. As a marketer, you guys have to be able to understand the way that bidding's changed. You need to take some time to audit your mobile experiences. Use some of those tools we put up there. These presentations are made available, so you can just take the links down from online. And last but not least, tablets are essentially just desktops that you can walk around with now. You need to ensure that they have fantastic experiences. Chris?
Thank you, Jeff. So we're moving right along here perfectly on time, making sure we're going to leave plenty of time for questions. But we now got a great two-man presentation coming up from my old friend and very savvy marketer, Kevin Lee. And he's joined by Derek Tucker. Et voila.
Great, thanks, Chris. So, clearly the landscape's really shifting with enhanced campaigns. I'm just sort of curious before we get rolling. How many of you caught the session earlier that had Campbell's Soup and Visa in it? So a lot of you. I really enjoyed that session a lot because one of the things that sort of seemed to be a common thread there was, the importance of getting the audience right. And there's a few areas in our presentation where I talk a little bit about that, and it was just sort of really fun to see some very savvy big brands who have lots of marketing dollars at their disposal really sort of bring the conversation back to brands. But with regards to what you guys need to do every day, right? I mean, the to-do list in search as a whole is endless, right? And the to-do list with regards to paid search in particular is actually endless, because you could do new keyword research, you could test landing pages, you could reorganize your campaigns, you could try to get yourself ready for enhanced campaigns, you could come up with adaptive design for mobile sites, etc. So it's a really endless list. So really, from both an operational perspective and from a media buying perspective, you need to figure out every day what should you do first. And that goes for yourselves if you're in-house and you're managing search for your company. It goes for you if you're at an agency and doing work for your clients. And it also, if you're delegating as an in-house person to an agency, sometimes you need to help them hash out what to do first. Because really, given the fixed amount of time, resources, and budget you have available, that's critically important.
Like Chris, I'm ex-military as well, only the difference is I'm Canadian Navy. So they do have a saying as well, though. Similar, all militaries across the world are very similar, and they have some of the same sayings. And as I floated around in our 10 canoes, 2 dinghies and a kayak, which comprises the Canadian Navy, they would always repeat KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And I think that a big part of what we do on a day-by-day basis, sometimes we need to take a step back and just do the basics. And I know you go through a lot of presentations. I've sat through a lot of them today, and there's a lot of very high-level information. But one of the things you have to start with, always start with, is who's your audience. And there's just a logical exercise. Use common sense. Look at your site. What does your funnel look like? This is the funnel I use. I have a much more complicated one when I do executive briefings within my organization. It's got all kinds of loop backs and everything else, but fundamentally, day by day, this is what I use. What's bringing them into the funnel? What's moving them through the funnel? What's closing them? And I'm very surprised when I talk to a lot of people because they don't dig into some of their own analytics data. And I'd be very shocked if there were many people in this room that didn't have Google Analytics or WebTrans or Omniture hooked up to their systems. So one of the pieces that is often missing, though, is how do you use that? So I'm fortunate that I've got both Omniture. We run 34 stores globally with Krell software. Omniture is our go-to piece of analytics. However, I've also applied Google Analytics. And if you go into Google Analytics, you can actually go to the stacked reports on the left-hand side, stacked reports, TRKID, and you can see the path that people take. If you've implemented your tracking codes appropriately, you can actually look at your codes and you can see what is the path that the customer took along that customer journey. How many times did they click? How long did they spend on site? You need to know this information. If they've got a short path, you treat them differently. If they've got a long path, you treat them very differently as well. Does a particular vehicle end up on the end of the path, which is a closer, or does it always appear in the middle? Because if it appears in the middle, and most organizations use last click attribution, it's not getting enough credit. More resources need to go to it. Google Analytics does the exact same thing. They call them basic channel grouping paths. You can customize them. I've customized them as well. Look through it. Understand what your customer is. And then finally, the analogy that I do like to use is just the basketball team. And we don't pay the person who puts the basket in the net. If we did, Shaquille O'Neal would have been paid all the money in the world when he was playing. He was the guy that put in the ball, but he wasn't paid all the money. If he doesn't get the ball, he can't put it in the net. You can't expect him to play both defense and offense. One person can only do a certain role. So some vehicles do great roles in some situations, but not so great in others. And looking at the paths is very important because you understand who inbounded the ball, how did it move up the court, who did the defense out of position, who gave it to the person who put it in the net, and you need to give everybody credit for the score.
So, armed with the data, to make these decisions, you really have to sort of decide what to do, right, each day, because the data informs your strategy and your data informs your tactical everyday execution. One of the things that often distracts all of us in the audience is the shiny object syndrome, right? So social media is the current shiny object of the day, although there's all sorts of different flavors of the shiny objects. And so even within search, sometimes shiny objects may appear, and you have to sort of be careful that you analyze how much scale you think you can get out of a particular initiative or a particular media buy or a particular new type of ad unit. You always have to be testing and trying stuff out, but you get rewarded and bonused and promoted and able to get a great new position at a much higher rate of pay by hitting home runs. So, a lot of the stuff that we talk about really requires that you get the basics right. But to Derek's point, it's amazing how many times we'll take over a campaign and a lot of the basics isn't right, or basics aren't right. And getting the foundational structure is really key before you start to take on some of the more advanced strategies and some of the more advanced tactics. Sometimes it's not your fault, right? Paid search has been around well over 10 years at this point, so the chance, and most of you have probably not been managing that campaign in excess of 10 years, meaning you didn't start the campaign, you inherited it. So you may have inherited campaigns that have all sorts of challenges associated with it. So I would recommend you take time to do the audit and make sure that you've got your foundation right. Once you've got that done, you can really do a tremendous amount by applying the 80-20 rule, the Pareto Rule, because almost any marketing data set, when you really start to look at it, will exhibit this kind of a power curve, meaning that there's a lot of opportunity within certain keywords, geographies, times of day, et cetera, and not so much in others. And by sort of doubling down where there is the opportunity that's driving a lot of your KPIs and not focusing as much on the areas that are not driving your KPIs, you can actually get a lot more volume efficiently out of your campaign. Big data is a hot buzzword right now because now the infrastructure exists to be able to append a lot of information onto smaller data sets, which give us much more rich information about what we should do. It informs us a lot more about the tactics and strategies that might work. One of the things that we've been doing a lot of work on over the last several years is really think about audience segmentation. And that's why I really liked the presentation earlier that Visa and Campbell Soup talked about, in particular Visa, because they brought everything back to audience. But similarly, Campbell Soup did too. They talked a lot about the personas that they were trying to target, in trying to, suddenly turn soup into something that's cool again, or hot, depending on how you drink your soup, I guess. Anyway, so the way I like to the framework I like to put around this is this idea that a lot of what we do every day, a lot of what we decide to do to a campaign on the front end, right, either the way we buy clicks, the way we buy impressions, or on the back end, is really done in an auction-based media environment because you're bidding for clicks or you're bidding for impressions in an ad exchange to give us more leverage, right? Anytime we either change the kinds of clicks that we're buying to make them convert better or convert at a higher value, that gives us ability to bid more if we want to. Similarly, if we take an existing stream of clicks that we are not changing those clicks. We're just getting those existing streams of clicks to convert better or at a higher value. That also gives us leverage. So leverage manifests itself as an ability to grow a campaign beyond its previous constraints at a specific ROI. You know, one of the things that gives us leverage in this ecosystem is quality score, right? And you think about all the different ad extensions that we have ability to change, and we think about certain things that we have a little bit of ability to change, like user reviews, which Google can choose to include in with your ads, right? All those things increase click-through rate. If it increases click-through rate, it's likely to increase your quality score. Now, Google says they normalize for these things so that they don't give an unfair advantage to advertisers who are using ad extensions effectively, but from the testing that I've done, there's still an advantage over and above whatever they normalize out in using the extensions that make sense, right? Chris talked about how the SERP was changing. And, you know, in the case of, you know, B&H photo and video, you actually have multiple ad extensions layering on top of each other, all increasing the visibility and the chances that the user is going to actually want to engage with either the local listing as an extension, where the little, you know, push pin A is, or the situation that there's PPC site links, or they have the social extension there. All of that is eye-catching, right? All that is eye candy. All of that is going to increase quality score, so all that's really good to go. If you haven't watched the video of Hal Varian, Google's chief economist, explaining both quality score and the auto discounting process, you should absolutely see this video. It's either available in one long video or an 8-part series that you can look at the individual parts. But it's still an oversimplification of quality score, because quality score is obviously quite complicated and has gotten more so. But even that oversimplification really, you know, will set off light bulbs for you in the idea of thinking, hey, just little changes in my account structure, in my ads that I'm running, you know, maybe even in my landing page, although that's a small contribution, can all improve my quality score, and that's an area of leverage. Because you can end up getting lower CPCs for the same position if you just increase your quality score. So, you know, that alone can rescue a failing campaign. Let's talk about some other levers that we have at our disposal that we maybe don't use as often as we should. Geography is a great proxy for audience, right? So I'm using examples where the differences in geography are between averages and DMAs are actually higher than they typically are at the DMA level. But I'm using it illustratively to show that if you break out audiences that are different by geography and use your data to think about that, you now have two choices in the way you attack geography within a campaign structure. You can either clone a campaign from a master into a child campaign and target it differently, or you can use the bid vectors within the enhanced campaign structure to take geographies and bid more. And in this case, if your conversion rate is higher in a specific geography, you can bid that much more for that geography and end up at the identical ROI. So you gain a lot more visibility, obviously, and you grow a lot of volume in your campaign. How many of you are e-commerce with a shopping cart? Maybe only about 15%. So for those of you who are managing on an ROAS basis, it's the same concept. Can you find geographies where the average shopping cart size is higher? If you're really trying to maximize around something that helps the company long-term, you may even have a lifetime customer value analysis by geography. And again, if you find geographies that over-index against the national average, you'll be able to afford to bid more. The differences are always audience, right? The audience is different based on geography. If you really want to make the quality score work in your advantage, you can actually change your ad messages by geography. You can't currently do that within the enhanced campaign structure. There's sort of no geographic equivalent of dynamic geography insertion into the ads yet. You know, there's ways to sort of jury rig stuff a little bit, but you know, for now it's probably better to identify large enough geographies where you want to tune your messages in the ads to make them custom to the geography to just run a separate campaign and not just rely on ad extensions. So, because keywords actually don't tell you that much about audience. Keywords tell you a tremendous amount about search intent, but they don't tell you that much about who's actually doing the searching. And if you think about, you know, old school marketing, a lot of the old school marketing briefs were written with the demographics and psychographics, the audience being really key to the success. And, you know, Campbell's and Visa went back to audience when they were trying to figure out how do we optimize our, $450 million campaign spend. So, what ends up being different by geography is a lot of these factors, right? So conversion rates are different by geography, but also income and wealth may be predictors of what you ended up seeing in your data, right? If you saw increases in shopping cart size, that may have been caused by changes in income or wealth. The problem is a lot of you are not spending $1 million a month on paid search. You don't have enough additional incremental organic traffic to supplement any holes in that. And so you're never going to be able to really get down to a granular level working purely off of your own data. So you have to think, all right, what's the predictor here? What's the variable where I can get access to a large data set, maybe to try out to see whether wealth or income is the actual factor driving the increased shopping cart size or the increased conversion rates. So what you can do is you can take large data sets and, right now we've done this within, cloning of the parent campaigns into child campaigns, and we've done really deep level analysis into data from the U.S. Census Bureau or data from the Internal Revenue Service to try to figure out how to build these map files so we can create hypotheses where we'll bid more in specific regions. So if you think about a national campaign, right, once you break it down, you have to define the sizes of the geographies to find that best happy medium between a large enough region to make it worth your while and a region that's sufficiently different from the average to make it worth your while. So, you can do the analysis based on conversion rate. You can have a bunch of different attributes you can get from data files, and you can basically build really cool campaigns around that. If you start to think about adaptive design on top of this, right, there have been marketers who've been very successful in actually creating a different user experience based on some of these factors as well. So, for example, there are some retailers in the travel category that are showing they're not raising the prices on hotels, but they're showing more expensive hotels to people who are visiting on Max, because they knew people who use Max are generally wealthier and have a preference for higher-end properties. Let's touch quickly on PLAs. How many of you are running PLA ads? Anybody? All right, maybe only about 10%, so I'll go pretty quickly. Product listing ads. You've all seen them. You've probably clicked on them. You've probably purchased as a result of them. What's fascinating about PLAs is optimization of PLA feeds uses a lot of best practices out of SEO. And the idea is that you can tune PLA ads in the same way that we used to tune Ink2Me XML paid inclusion feeds back, I don't know how many years ago, Chris, that was, but it's certainly a while. It's probably been 6 or 7 years at this point. And you can still maintain relevance, but basically tune your feeds. You can also double serve, right? We don't know exactly what a customer wants when they type in a query that Google thinks is worthy of running PLAs. So often you'll have AdWords ads running in concurrently with that. So it gives the user the option of engaging with an ad that sometimes has telephone number information in it, sometimes has local information in it, as well as a PLA ad that has the image and price. So you can basically allow the user to self-select which ad is most interesting to them, and you can test to see how these work together. So it's pretty cool. There's also an opportunity to do image optimization. If you're running PLAs and you have a generic product that you sell, running a different image than everybody else who's running those ads will make your image pop. You're more likely to get that visualization. What's cool here is, by running the different ad, they probably pay a whole lot less to end up in this 8-pack than they would otherwise. You also have to think about how you're merchandising your images. It used to be only you had to worry about your images on your site itself, right? Do they look good in the context of my site? But now that the images are being pumped out in a feed, you have to think about, well, how do they look in this environment, right? Do I want to show my apparel on different backgrounds? Do I want to show my apparel with heads on people and humans, or do I want to show my apparel just without, not even on a body? I have all these choices with regards to how I merchandise my products. So You can also do price optimization. That's one of the variables you have available to you in PLAs. So you can choose to come in at a lower price than other people who are typically showing up for the same search query. You know, and sometimes on generic searches like, you know, women's wool sweater, there'll be a diversity of price, obviously, for a very different product. And you have to sort of think about, hey, I'm not necessarily always going to show up for a very specific search to my product. I may be showing up for generics as well. So that's it for me. This is just some best practices with regards to all paid search and search in general. Thanks.
Thank you very much. As you can see, we went in from the very high level into the awesome granular stuff from Kevin. I do want to open it up for questions. I got a quick question for Jim, and then also a quick question for Jeff. But Jim, you run an enterprise level SEO tool company. I should name some of your competitors. Conductor Searchlight would be a competitor. Maybe Search Metrics. It's a very expensive tool set, or I'm sorry if that's a bad way to characterize it. But in either case, people are investing a lot of money in your type of tool. In this kind of a changing environment, how are you going to make sure that your tool isn't outdated by the time it comes to market? And you might need to use this. Sorry.
Sure. Absolutely, Chris. So there's really kind of three core sources that we look at, right? The first is we really work with a lot of brands, and we look at sort of what are the focus areas that they have on their roadmap. What are the areas where they're looking to focus based on the problems that they're trying to solve. The second thing is we actually look at this massive data cube. We process over 100 terabytes of data per week. We are looking at all the different types of signals that we have access to, and that allows us to actually understand, hey, there's this massive update that's happening, and here's what's the impact that it's having on search. And then we are able to look at things like Venice that drives us to include things like blended rank. We're able to look at the impact of social on search. And the third is really sort of our partnerships, where we work closely with Twitter as well as Facebook. Both LinkedIn, Yahoo, Microsoft are all customers of ours. So we work really closely with the channels to understand sort of what are some of the things they're pushing and how is that evolving in terms of the ecosystem.
Great. So obviously you got to keep up to speed. I've got questions from the audience. We've got two speakers over there. Mics also. I got a quick question for Jeff while the audience is thinking of their questions. So Jeff, a lot of people were hating on the enhanced campaigns because let's say they are a retail and they've decided that they really only want to play at the product level for mobile because they know that a lot more people are finding their actual product level pages from a mobile device. And they're mad now because, they had the campaign all tweaked and set up and so forth in order to be able to serve this specific goal that they had as a business. Is it fair, first of all, for Google to come in and just change the game completely like that and say, look, all you have to do is just change your adjustments, bid up 20% on that one and down? It seems to be pretty difficult and a little bit obtuse of Google. I'm just curious, I know you sort of took their side on it, but what about from the other perspective? What are the key pain points there that hopefully people can overcome? I know that you already described some of them in your session, but what should marketers do if they're in that boat?
If they're pissed.
Yes.
Okay. So I think today Google tried to calm people down a little bit by going to ad group level targeting for this, because that is going to allow you to essentially bid at the keyword level. There are plenty of folks in this room, I'm sure, if you're really into paid search, you probably have some of your more important keywords in their own ad groups anyway. So you'll have that flexibility and control. The problem is that it's actually more work now. Like for me and my team, it's going to take a lot more effort to do it up front. That's where I think people should be really upset. For 3 years or so, Google was like, hey, break it all out, mobile, tablet, desktop, completely separate, 3 different workflows. If you're using some sort of other technology platform on top of AdWords to manage paid search, made it really easy to do. And now it's going to be a lot more difficult to do that. Just to play the contrary side of things, again, very briefly, if you're the kind of marketer that is only playing on specific keywords in mobile, you're going to be in for some challenges. mobile search on smartphone devices, to be very specific, is going to be about 50% of search by the end of the year.
1.5 or 5.0?
5.0. So that's our internal data. Google will tell you something very similar, but we take our pretty large group of advertisers and look at the data coming in for them, and we see something very similar. So we know it's going to be pretty close. If you're only focusing on specific keywords, you're going to miss out on a lot of people that are interested in your brand.
Great. Still, any questions from the audience? We still have some time here. We are at 4:25 left. I've got actually a question for you, but go ahead and first comment on the, I'd love to hear your opinion on the enhanced.
Yeah, I think there's opportunities to work within the enhanced campaign construct and do some band-aids, right? So what marketers had done who had sort of finished their website relaunches over the last 3 years and had not done adaptive design websites, but they had a very lopsided keyword set, meaning that there was like a 90-10 rule, 10% of the keywords drove 90% of the traffic and revenue. They built microsites for those, right? And so they actually had a different user experience. So the biggest challenge then becomes the fact that under the new construct, there's not a one-to-many relationship between an ad group and a listing and that site, right? It's basically the site is sort of forced to be adaptive, but you can do click routing, right? Because a lot of the campaign management platforms essentially touch the click on its way to your site. So you can either build a click routing application at your site side to redirect the traffic that comes in using a value track parameter that indicates that it's a tablet, and you can just give it a different user experience. And the other thing you can do is just by using the bid vectors intelligently with regards to the mobile versus the desktop, laptop, tablet, you essentially can sort of tune two different campaigns to be more focused on one versus the other, giving the appropriate user experience to the individual on a specific device, even if you don't have a fully adaptive design website yet.
That's a great point, and it just goes to show, marketing masters like Kevin, there's always sort of a workaround and a way to be able to survive within a new environment. If suddenly some big asteroids hits the Earth, that's obviously going to be a cataclysmic event, but if it's a medium-sized asteroid, you might be able to figure out a way to get around that. I'm curious, and you may all have an opinion on this. In the example that you showed earlier, there's a higher conversion rate in San Diego, so you may want to up your bid 25% there. What about the other layers of the onion, right? Let's say that also in San Diego, it tends, and this is where my paid search expertise might be a little lacking, but is it possible that I could also pay more in San Diego on a per-click basis, especially if I've got competitors that are just bidding in San Diego and increasing the competitive landscape? And if that's the case, how can we work together, and looking at SEO potentially, and I don't know if this is something that the Bright Edge tool set or there's some other tool sets out there that are helping people to try to balance some of that, again, there's a lot of layers to this onion, right? But what are some of the other tricks beyond just simply raising 25% in San Diego, especially if there's other KPIs that you got to consider? Guys and Derek, anyone?
Yeah, SEO is still not as regionalized, although there has been a tremendous amount of data showing that the SERPs, when there's local intent, are diverging pretty significantly from sort of the national SERP. So to the extent that you might want to use some best practices in local SEO to try to go after unaffordable PPC environments, that's a great idea. The other thing obviously is you have more targeting levers even within the paid environment, right? So even if you can't afford, because your competition, your Roto-Rooter, and there's some really great guy in San Diego called Mr. Plumber, and you just can't afford to be there, you don't think at all, run some additional data layers, right? So maybe time of day or day of week can allow you to cherry pick out the valuable clicks on top of geography as a segmentation level, right? So there's almost always some way of picking the very best clicks out of your paid search ecosystem. You don't have that option in organic. You get once you succeed, you take your click stream and you congratulate yourself, right? But in paid search, you do have the ability to cherry pick.
Jim, any ideas on how you try to marry that data within your tool or a tool set?
Well, I think one of the things that from an organic search perspective is you do want to be able to subset really quickly the keywords. It is easy to subset the keyword set that do have local intent, right, or that the search engine believes has local intent. And you should certainly treat that very differently than the rest of your keyword portfolio, because those are going to have very different behaviors. And you want to look at both in two pieces on the organic side. One, you want to understand if the local pack showing up, are you showing up in the local pack? And two, how is your regular page performing in that, and how is it getting reshaped in terms of its position on the SERP, given that the local pack is coming into the SERP page? I think those are dimensions that are really important to understand.
Great. Jeff or Derek, any last words of wisdom?
No, not on that front.
No? Well, thank you for those of you that stayed throughout the Q&A. Give yourself a round of applause, and please join me in thanking the